Hello, this is Dr. Coach K, and today we're going to talk about how we move in this society. And if you don't know who I am a holistic life coach, motivational coach, and spiritual coach, and business coach. I do as much as I can to help someone achieve their excellence, whether it's their goals, their strategies, their dreams, their spiritual destiny. I am hopeful that I can also do it to communities and societies, governments, and corporate cultures. I am interested in expanding my brand commercially to be able to build micronations as a way to give sovereignty to communities and cultures, allowing them to be the checks and balances of governments as well as societies and different leaders. I'm hoping that power can become an accessible to the good, the righteous, and the humble and the meek, in a way that we can become socially responsible and to be an equilibrium to the society, building egalitarian societies, not just capitalist societies, not just communism, not just socialism, and not just what we call a marketplace, but we can create a transformative lifestyle and transcend into sustainability using actualization systems and spirituality as a way to be cooperative and to work together as a community. We want to, one day abolish the prison system, abolish high mortality rates through violence, through sacrificing, and of course through death. We want to live in a society that we can regenerate, restore, rebuild, rejuvenate, and to be a great or excellent stewardship to our planet Earth and all the species that come and go and live in it. Our hope is to celebrate and protect our ancestors who have given their lives to this ideology of servitude leadership. And I talk so much about it because I realized that there was 400 years of generation of child trafficking to build this globalization, what we call the 21st century. And if it wasn't for our ancestors that gave their lives, sweat and blood, and a lot of times atrocities that they had to endure to make sure we came in and lived as superheroes, or I call the superheroism generation. So let's begin. So we're going to go ahead and keep moving through the 3 textbooks that I chose for this second course in our mini curriculum called the Game Changers Championship. We did The Strength to Love by Martin Luther King Jr. Now we're moving into the 3 books, The Rich Get Richer and the Poor Get Prison by Dr. Raymond and Dr. Layton. Then we also work through coaching, Evoking Excellence, and others using the technique of coaching to get us there by Dr. Flattery. And the last book is Dr. Cindy Trim, The Prosperous Soul. So now we use the technique, the transformative leadership style and tone, which is coaching, Evoking Excellence, and others. And then we, as ourselves, has to be the overflow system, which is called the Prosperous Soul, teaching us how to have a richer life and our journey through internalizing our needs, so that we don't always have to get externally what we need, but we can get it internally, so that we can change the dynamics and have resources accessible and change the dynamics of scarcity. and disparities. So let's begin. We're moving kind of slow, even though there's only 4 chapters, and the rich get richer and the poor get poor. I like to use my gift of knowledge and gift of discernment of the spirit to kind of build a bridge for those that have different elements of their life that do not get addressed. I try to use the frequency and vibrate highly so that I can cover grounds that normally do not get covered. So we're moving through it, and we're still on chapter 1, but we're getting close to chapter 2. We're on page 35, and we're going to continue on reading from the prison system on why so many generations promoted and supported the ideology of prisons and the ideology of criminal justice and law enforcement and capital punishment. And these mindsets, our goal is to provide an educational awareness that we do not have to survive on prisons. We do not have to feed on prisons for our protection and our safety. If you can tell, through 400 years, the prison system was not useful because you had populations that went through Holocaust, genocide, that were vulnerable, that were bystanders, innocent, and they still got slaughtered like a slaughterhouse. So there was no protection. So prisons did not work. It did not allocate justice. It did not support any protection. It was not a community of what I call impeccable social responsibility or accountability to the innocent. And so today in the 21st century, as we see again, it does not show any merit or promise to keep people protected or safe that are innocent, that are vulnerable, that are victims. They do not do anything to protect people. So why do we rely and count on these systems? Because we know that these systems are not for justice. These are not systems that are leading or advocating for justice. These systems are actually gatekeepers to protect a ideology that we call supremacy. We are talking about protecting, as in preservation, the kin of supremacy, the systems of supremacy. And what is the supremacy is when you want to become a supreme being over society. You want to govern, you want to dictate, you want to have an authoritarian society that teaches people that they cannot survive. And when they have allocations or when they have support, then that is someone depending or codependent on a supreme being in earth that is human. So you have a dividing line of some people supreme beings and some people that are not. And so you have this divided household, and it cannot stand. That means you see no progress, no change, no transformation, no opportunities to actually gain a wealth of true wealth of unity. We notice that in the Bible times, what happened to humanity, they did come together and they were unified in one body, one house. And they did not see each other as supreme beings. They saw the entity in heaven as a supreme being. And so they came together as one community, and then they went towards heaven so that they can have access to the supreme being. They wanted to protest the supreme being. They wanted to do more than just live as a unified body. They wanted more. So they started to head towards the heavens, and they started building towards the heavens. And they had called this the season and the generation of the Tower of the Babel. And so we can see that prison was never a effective system. It was always historically defective. And for us to continue with the mindset and hold on to this, it shows our illness and shows our slothfulness and our hoardness to hold on to supreme or supremacy instead of sovereignty. So let's kind of understand the ground level of supremacy or supreme. Why do we hunger and thirst after power and dominance, and why does that make us feel protected when in reality it does not protect us? Okay, so let's go to paragraph 1. By affecting so many young Black men, it's harder for Black men to get an education and find good jobs. In his 2007 presidential address to the American Society of Criminology, Professor Tonry went further. If it aims were to reduce Black men's chances of earning a decent living or being successfully married and a good father or being socialized into pro-social values, it is hard to know how the criminal justice system could do those things better. In addition, a study by the Sentencing Project indicates that the enormous number of African American men who have been convicted of felonies and therefore deprived of their right to vote is having a profound negative impact on the Black community's ability to participate in the political process, because so much of the recent increase in imprisonment has been of inner city Black men who were involved in families and who had at least part-time legitimate employment at the time of their arrest and incarceration. Social scientists are beginning to study the ways in which massive imprisonment is undermining the family and other community institutions, depriving children of male role models and women of potential husbands and support. Criminologists have found evidence suggesting that massive imprisonment may weaken inner city institutions of informal social control and thus lead to more crime in the long run. Others argue that high levels of incarceration can weaken its stigma, and thus the deterrent value of imprisonment and incarceration can strengthen ties between prison gangs and offenders on the street. Can we honestly act as if we do not know that our prison system, including our failure to ensure a meaningful post-release non-criminal alternative for the ex-con, is a source of crime? Should we really pretend then that we do not know why ex-cons turns to crime? Recidivism does not happen because ex-cons miss their alma mater. In fact, if prisons are supposed to deter people from crime, one would expect that ex-prisoners would be the most deterred because the deprivation of prison are more real to them than the rest of us. Recidivism is thus a doubly poignant testimony to the job that prisons does not in preparing its graduates for crime. Yet we do little to change the nature of prisons or to provide real services to ex-cons. In his 2004 State of the Union address, President Bush seemed to indicate that he understood at least a small part of recidivism problem when he discussed the 600,000 inmates released back into society each year. He said, "We know from long experience that if they can't find work or a home or help, they are much more likely to commit more crimes and return to prison." The Second Chance Act finally became a law in April 2008 with authorized expenditures of $400 million over 4 years. When divided into the 2 million inmates who would be released over that period, that amounts to about $167 per inmate. The 2012 budget for the Department of Justice reduced funding for the act from $100 million a year to $63 million at a time when more inmates are being released from prison because of cost-saving measures. That is hardly enough to ensure that America is the land of the second chance. And when the gates of prison open, the path ahead should lead to a better life. So we're going to stop. We're going into a different theme and topic. We are clearly seeing scientific studies showing that the prison system is used as a race construct, institution of isolation, alienation, and deprivation, which is the African American populations. We see that in the numbers statistically. Now, where do we go from here? Now that we know this institution is biased and discriminatory and unjust and unfair and definitely very severe against the Black communities. And this is not people saying this out of complaint or victimization. This is actual statistics and scientifically proven now. So where do we go from here? Because we cannot move out of dominance and power because of supremacy, we have to learn how to work internally, how we can evoke excellence in each other first and then others through a prosperous soul and not a victimized soul. So that when we go into prisons, when we go into hostile environments, and when we go into conflictive environments, we know how to mediate through it and resolve conflict for win-win, and we don't lose in this process. We want to be able to show some value in the process of decision making, in the process of transformation, in the process of transcending these institutions that bear the heavy loaded of depriving Black societies and Black communities safety, security, access to resources, access to wealth, access to protection. And these things we have been saying for 400 plus years. And where do we go from here when the prison system now is used as slavery and chattel slavery and a place to enslave and to be in captivity? So here we go again, back to the generation of Emancipation Proclamation. You let go millions of slaves to stigmatization, to hostile environments, to communities that wouldn't give them work, food, resources, quality of care, quality of services, quality of products. And then you do this without giving them authority, giving them rights to become the head of their household, to become their authority, or to become leaders, only to go into communities that are violently taken from them through massive destructive behavior through their neighbors that were jealous or envious of their ability to be sustainable. And so this is happening again through the prison system. You have the prisons that is enslaving populations. As they said, they release 600,000 men a year, and total of 2 to 3 million people enslaved in using these prison systems to deprive people from life. See, they're not saying deprive them from responsibility because they are being used as slaves, working for free. They don't earn any money. They're put into cages that keeps them from living a quality of life. So here you are, you have an unhealthy environment that is being used as a reinforcement to target a population that has historically been slaves in this society, that was child trafficked for 400 years, being taken and stripped from their communities as children from birth, and then bred as property, and then you send them again in the second wave into imprisonment. So now not only are they enslaved by their captors, they're enslaved now by the community's authorities or government. So now it's not just an institution. At first, it was started as a master. That means they claim it wasn't institutional. It was subjective. That means each master had the right to choose how they treated their property. So now you have this ideology around a moral code for each individual for the first 400 years. Now you come into the mass incarceration, and now it's an institution. Now it's no excuse. First, you have said to your ancestors, like, they didn't know what they were doing. It was a personal decision, and you're not accountable for their mistakes. And now you move the same population, and now it's an ideology in an institution law. So now it's a construct. So as Maslow was saying, it's not an individual actualization. Now it is a group actualization. So now it's moved from one manifestation into another manifestation. We're not talking about the arm or a leg. Now we move in towards an anatomy, a whole body system that is incorporated. And this corporate, which is a body, a culture of supremacy that is dictating and targeting a population to enslave. And now they're not just working for free. Now they are captives. They're put in a cage, a system that will not allow them to live. And even though it's not capital punishment where they're put to death, it is a form of death. It is a new manifestation of death, because they're taken out of life, they're taken out of a society of life, and they're not given a quality of life, not even a healthy life. So now you have laws that is encouraging, and it's also reinforcing the ideology that you don't have to be morally correct to a population because they're criminals or they have convicted a crime, because they have done something. Now you have a system that cannot prove crime. So now it's a biased system that chooses who is a criminal and who is not based on evidence, not based on logistics, not based on analytics, but based on a person. And this person is 9 out of 10 times convicting not their peer. They're convicting a cross-cultural peer, which means there's cultural barriers, hostility, historical hostility, and none of this stuff has been repaired. And so it's hard to say that you have the right to judge this population when in fact your population has not been judged. To purge, cleanse, repair, and become a model of something that is called justice. So now where do we go from here? Where do we go from here? We have created a second wave of slavery to the same population and their descendants. Not only have we stripped them from life and any promise to return to it, we have also made them captives, prisoners of war for the second wave. So the first wave is like a great tribulation. Now we're working on the second Great Tribulation for this population. So they're not just a Holocaust as their ancestors, but now they're descendants. So where do we go from here? And we think that it's not going to be passed on to other communities, other cultures. So unless the ancestors and the descendants don't care about their children and their future, you don't think this is going to repeat and be invasive. You think it's just going to stick to the Black population? You think it's just going to be the African American population that is going to create this perfect Holocaust that stays only within their descendants? Is that how your mind works? Because that is not logistical or logical, right? It shows the hindsight, the short-sightedness of your emotional intelligence as well as your intelligence, your IQ. Because even the greatest thinkers of the world understands what comes up must go down, right? That's basic law of gravity. So what do you think the basic law of gravity of socialism or social interaction is going to be? There's going to happen where the body is going to adjust to it. It's going to adapt. See, 400 years of enslavement and then now the second wave, you don't think that it's not mutating or transforming, adapting the person that has been in the bloodlines for 8 generations to 16 generations? Do you not think that? Do you think the body's just going to keep doing the same thing and not build no antidotes? You really think it's not going to build any cure? You don't know how the human body works. If you don't understand biology, chemistry, or physics, you definitely don't understand mathematics. To think that the body is going to just endure without any transformation, when in fact, by your actions, you have been transformed. Just being in supremacy for 400 years, you're transforming because it's making you weaker, not stronger, because your body is adapting to your lack of moral code. It's destroying the earth. The earth is retaliating. It's resisting. And the supremacy ideology is making you weak. And what does that mean, making you weak? Is now you're no longer able to survive the adaptation of the world around you. And that is your fault because it is like the laws of gravity. You didn't know your principles. You didn't know your values. And you definitely didn't know basic science to understand the scientific methodology of the way the earth is transforming based on how it is interacting with you. That's called social adaptation. So you had a lack of understanding. You and your ancestors are lack in comprehension because this is basic math. 1 + 1 = 2. 1 - 1 is 0. So you keep taking and taking and taking and taking, you depleting. You are depriving, and you're going to go towards the negative zone, the dark matter zone. And you think you're going to survive the dark matter zone when you was really designed and purposely made to live in the positive zone? You have put your own soul into an abyss by doing negative mathematics, by your actions, by your thoughts, by your deeds, by your strategies. And then when it starts adapting to a negative zone, when it wasn't created to survive a negative zone, see, there's a difference when something is done to you than when you intentionally, maliciously, premeditated do it. It came out of your own mouth for you to not understand these principles. So now, as a philosopher, where do we go from here? Do we continue to build disinfective or a world that is going to adapt and transcend and then leave you behind because of your systematic approach is in the negative zone? Or do you want this society that is adapting, the earth is adapting, to come back and come get you? For what? Why would a society that's been in captivity for more than 400 years turn around and become the very savior that you couldn't be for them? See, this is the problem of this solution, is why would a society save a system that has tore and dismantled and destroyed 400 years plus of populations? Are you hoping that they're going to be like Joseph in the story of God, where they come out of slavery, they come out of prison and rise up and become a governor because of adaptation, because they live their true purpose of what they were created to be, and they became elevated, refined like diamond from a rock, and then turn around and save the population that basically at their hands was destroyed? Is that what you want? You want a population not to condemn you, not to send you to damnation, to judge you, what, merciful and compassionate, to have this population to bring you in to their homes, in their families, around their children, to be pets, to be domesticated? I mean, what were you and your ancestors and your descendants thinking when they promoted and supported and bought into these things and put money into these things? And even the poor communities took their hands and killed for this system and ideology to protect it. So here you have a population that finally becomes this level of galactic universal governor, because of the excellence it has adapted to all of these systematic oppressions, and because of their muscles spiritually, emotionally, physically, socially becomes strong and solid and rooted and established on solid ground of infinite wisdom and infinite understanding that cannot be justified based on bloodlines alone, but by character and virtue. Then you want them to turn around and show compassion and mercy and forgive you for your sins, your descendants' sins, and your ancestor sins, and the systematic ideology sins, all in one breath, and then have this type of predatory, systematic ideology group system that could not transform, could not change, could not adapt, and was on its death bed. You want them to save you. You now are dependent on them to save you. The prisoners of war. Very interesting. So what do we do now? Because that time has not arrived yet. We're right there in the middle cusp, what we call the fork in the road, where we as a society can change the future. We're at the fork in the road where the descendants is not yet dead, and the plaintiffs is not yet dead, that we are like a harvest ready to be reaped. So we're at a fork in the road. So what do we do now? Do we abolish prisons? Do we abolish systems of oppression? Do we abolish quickly, urgently, before it does more damage? Where everything that you hold dear is gone based on the negative zone of thoughts, premeditated actions, intentions, malicious intentions towards a target audience that will survive, adapt, transform as individuals and group. Maslow said it. Basic laws of math says it. Gravity, physics says it. Chemistry says it. Everything in realism scientifically says it. And yet you want to deny it and wait until it's too late, where you will be asking for mercy and compassion and your descendants. So that makes any type of sense. So you want the prisoners of war to show compassionate and mercy when you could not show compassionate and mercy. So you're hoping that evil do not beget evil, but evil beget good. So you're hoping that the prisoners of war will choose good because they don't want to repeat the cycle, or you don't want them to feel the pain and want anyone else to feel the pain. You don't mind trafficking their children and hoping that they won't allow others to traffic your children. And you want them to be your protection, your covering. For what? They just transformed into the governor of the universe. And now they got to forgive your society. They got to plead on your case. To do what? Where would you go after they forgave you? Into the abyss as free agents? What would you become? Pets? Domesticated properties to them? Serving them all the days of your life would be a much compassionate, merciful trade-off than what you have given to them. Is that what you want? I saw one movie from Wakanda that says death is better than imprisonment and slavery. So is that what you're saying? You want to become their slaves because they're holy, they're good, and you think slavery is better than death? Because you're in the hands of good people, compassionate people, merciful people. That's interesting. Very interesting. I'm going to let it simmer a little bit and get you thinking of what the possibilities of infinite futures can happen in the crossroads of choice and decision making daily. So while you're thinking about that, I'm going to touch base on coaching as a technique to evoke excellence in others. We're on page, let me see where we're at. Page 27, I think. Yeah, we're on 27, called assessment. Okay, using basic principles of assessment while coaching. 27, and then we're almost on chapter 3. While it is the case that observation is always according to someone, in coaching, observations are always made within a tradition that provides distinctions and standards. It's at this point that observation can begin to be spoken about as assessment. In coaching, assessment must precede the formal coaching process because the coach's providing of distinctions and practices must be suitable for the individual client. Although beginners must learn the basics, for example, how to play scales or how to shoot free throws, excellence in coaching always comes from an adaptation of standard procedures and practices to suit the individual client. The initial, largest, and most challenging part of assessment is the coach's attempt to understand the structure of interpretation of the client. Sometimes this appears as such a gigantic project that people dismiss it as undoable or use it as a reason not to start coaching at all. This is the wrong way to understand assessment in coaching because it leads to no action. It's the same as the piano teacher explaining the extreme complexity of the Chopin piece instead of trying to recreate the whole world of a person on one's first outing as a coach. It's probably better to determine what part of the structure of interpretation of the client is relevant to the coaching effort and to focus on that. Being coached ourselves by experienced people and the use of relevant models is essential in these initial coaching endeavors. As the coach becomes more experienced, it is possible to understand the client in more and more dimensions, therefore leading to more sophisticated, subtle, and customized coaching programs. A chapter on assessment and assessment models follows. See Chapter 6. The other aspect of assessment has to do with assessing the level of competence, or in some cases, the presence of quality of the client. This, like all assessments, is based upon observation of the client, either as the client goes through normal routines or in specially designed exercises that reveal levels of competence. A good example of this kind of exercise is when, during the first meeting with a tennis or golf coach, the coach asked to play a game of tennis or a round of golf with the new client. Probably the most difficult part of assessment is the verification of its validity. How do we know that the assessment is more than just our own prejudices or projections on the client? The way to verify assessment is ultimately, of course, in the success of the coaching program itself. But before that, there are some tests that the coach can apply. Some of this is a summary of what's already been said. Is the assessment being made with distinctions that are part of a tradition? Is the assessment based upon observations that can be made by any competent observer? And is the coach able to cite particular instances of the observation? And so we're going to turn the page. Can the coach accurately predict future action the client will take based upon the current assessment? Or can the coach say what action the client's taking in other unobserved domains based upon the assessment? Does the assessment show life to the client in a way that the client wasn't able to see it before? Does the assessment show life to the client in a way that the client wasn't able to see it before? Does the assessment allow both the client and the coach to synthesize many of the observations of the coach and to make sense of many of the actions of the client? And does the assessment free the client to take action? That is, does it do more than merely describe something? Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and finish up this chapter. By now, you probably understand why language, observation, and assessment are being addressed simultaneously. They are inseparable. None ever occurs without the others. Whenever we make an observation or even use a particular word, there is always some level of assessment as part of its meaning. The coach has to be very rigorous in the use of language. That is, he has to be precise, consistent, and grounded in the way he speaks and listens to the client. This is the essential competence in coaching, and it is what will allow coaching to occur. My coaching program with Bob had two main parts. Part one was our one-on-one conversations, and the part two was the work that Bob did on his own. The later work was obviously more important because that is what would continue after our coaching ended. In order to work with himself and realize the products of coaching, both had to become a more acute observer and a more grounded assessor, which meant he had to learn a language that would allow him to make new observations and assessments. Practically, it meant that I sent Bob out at the end of each of our sessions together with a self-observation exercise. A self-observation exercise is precisely defined set of observations that a client performs over a period of time. The point of the exercise is to free up the client to take up new action, provide grounded assessments for decision making, and provide some power in intervening with reoccurring patterns of behavior. Many examples of self-observation appear at the end of this book. Suggested readings. So I have a list of these suggested readings. I will post them if those that are interested can look into it at a later date. Or you can buy the book Coaching, Evoking Excellence and Others by James Flattery and get the list as well. So what is my response to using coaching to evoke excellence into others? We talked about these strongholds, these systems that seem to keep showing up in our society's constructs and social normalcy and socialization. So what happens? How can we abolish these things in a timely manner so that we can have some manifestation and results in our generation? You know, when Dr. Martin Luther King had a dream, he wanted to see results in his generation, just like a coach. A coach, when they're practicing for a game, they don't want improvement 3 or 4 teams later. They want that team to show evidence or progress in their games so that they can win games. This whole ideology of winning games is the results of coaching, having assessments, precise assessments, having coaches being able to have a language that helps evoke excellence out of people. These are the reasons why this happens. It's because the assessment, the language, and the observations are precise. They are implemented in a sophisticated way. And this is why it's very important if you're in the calling of being a coach, you have these skills and you implement them and you masterfully influence others, because people need to develop in their humanity to their highest consciousness to perform and be high performers, regardless of their disabilities, regardless of their illnesses, and regardless of their shortcomings. They need to show up and perform on their highest level. You see the trees, you see the animals, everyone is showing up to perform in their highest level, as well as the earth. So humanity as well needs to do the same as a group, right? A group actualization system. So we're going to close our session today with The Prosperous Soul by Dr. Cindy Trim. And we are on actually page 43, which is chapter 2. We're starting a new chapter. So I'm going to go ahead and dive into a problem of paradigms. I do not understand what I do, for what I want to do, I do not do, but what I hate, I do. Romans 7:15. And this is going to dive into that whole problem of almost like losing weight. You want to lose weight, but you have a problem because you can't lose weight because of all these factors, whether it's unseen or seen. So let's begin. Anyone who has ever sought to make serious change in his or her life has experienced the paradox that Paul describes in Romans 7:15. It starts with, I know what is right, and it is not something that is currently a part of or expression of my life. I want to change, but just can't seem to do so. I know what to do, but I don't do it. There is a longing from deep within to be different, to be better. It may be a physical quality, such as losing weight, or it can be a character issue, such as being more generous, patient, or kind. It might be emotional, such as I need to believe in myself and my abilities more. Or it could be professional, whether being more focused, more productive, more punctual, or communicating more effectively. It might be social, a desire to reach out to friends more, connect more deeply within a community, or make more meaningful contributions. It could be that you want to create more emotional intimacy with your spouse or engage more deeply with your children as a parent. Or perhaps it is as basic as getting a better grip on your finances or managing your time better so you can exercise every day or simply get the rest you need every night. More and better. But something keeps holding you back. We address such issues in a number of ways, from merely thinking about them on occasion as saying, I really need to get on that, to make to-do lists or setting specific goals. Inevitably, something will come up. We'll get distracted by something more urgent, something easier to do. So that is simply more entertaining. Then in a month or so, we think again about that change we desire, and go through all of the same steps to nowhere. Time again, we find what I want to do, I do not do, but what I hate, I do. Thus is the frustration of trying to change from the outside in. As convicted as we may feel, as sincere as we try to be, prosperity rarely comes the way we want it. It takes discipline, persistence, commitment. We might desire to be thinner, more respected, more loving, and better loved by our families, more successful or financially stable. Desires almost all of us have in one form or another. But such prosperity doesn't come by wishing for it. The person you are right now will always be the person you are right now, except of course a little older with more regrets, until you choose to embrace change at a fundamental level. Change doesn't start with forming new habits. It starts with asking the right questions, understanding what drives you, and clarifying yourself, the outcome you inherently desire. Like an Olympian training for the gold medal, you have to dig deep and discover what really moves you. What is your why behind the what you're hoping to achieve? It starts with changing the way you think about who you are and what you're capable of and how you see your future self. Are you standing on a podium? Have you won the race? As Proverbs tells us, carefully guard your thoughts because they are the source of true life. Another translation states that how you think determines the course of your life, whether you win or lose. You, however, are your only competition when it comes to prospering as an individual. You can only become the best version of yourself. You will never be the best version of someone else. You can only win the race God has set before you by being the very best possible you. You might as well put your time in and get into God's life gym. Stretch those mental and spiritual muscles. Develop your prayer stamina. Learn how to compete with yourself and win. Never stop striving to beat your personal best. Go for the gold and see yourself proudly standing on your own podium of success. But now I have to ask you, how do you define success? Ariana Huffington, author of Thrive, asserts that the current model of success that equates success with burnout, sleep deprivation, and driving ourselves into the ground is not working. She has created what she calls the third metric of success that redefines success as a focus on well-being, wisdom. Sorry about that. That was my alarm clock. So I'm going to wrap this up because we're going to get to the prosperity point, and this is the problems of paradigms. So we're continuing on the second chapter the second paragraph on page 45, that redefines success as a focus of well-being, wisdom, wonder, compassion, and giving, as we will see in chapter 4. These represent the overall hallmarks of empowerment. So I would assert that true prosperity is not so much about achieving traditional benchmarks of success as it is about being empowered to create, see things in a different light, think outside of the box, transform what is into what can be, consider every failure as an opportunity to learn and ever cost as an occasion to give selflessly. It's all about how you see. One of Leonardo da Vinci's keys to creativity and innovation was what he called a sapere vengere, which simply means knowing how to see. To him, it meant he had to learn to recast the way he saw things if he was ever going to grasp whatever breakthrough he was chasing at the time. It spurred a systematic process he used to broaden his understanding of any topic that caught his fancy. In this way, he would virtually learn to re-see things, changing his perspective and learning to view them through a new enlightening paradigm. He learned to look deeper and beyond what seemed immediately evident. He recognized that the problem, whether how to achieve a particular artistic expression or solve a physical challenge, was not really the problem. The problem was the paradigm through which he saw the issue. It would only be when he saw things differently, when he knew something he didn't before, when he was inspired in a way he had not yet been, or when he recognized some detail he had not yet noticed, that he could achieve the transformation he was pursuing. This is exactly what Paul recognized and communicated in Romans chapter 7 and 8. Many quote Romans chapter 7 as a defeatist chapter and point to it saying even the great apostle Paul struggled with doing what he believed was right. But those who say that missed the paradigm shift in Romans chapter 8. Paul was not confessing his own struggles with living the type of life he wanted to live. He was expressing that when you want to change, you can't do it through outward rules and regulations, goals, and resolutions. You can only do it with a fundamental change of perspective, a paradigm shift. You have to step out of the defeatism of Romans 7 into possibilities of Romans 8. There is therefore no condemnation, failure to those who are in Christ Jesus, who do not walk according to the flesh, to outward trying, but according to the Spirit, the source of inward change. Romans 8:1. In this statement, Paul is contrasting living according to the rules and regulations of the law of the Old Testament, the long litany and mandates of which the 10 Commandments is only the beginning, with a new life that pours forth from the Spirit of God living within us. It is a contrast of trying to live by goals and resolutions versus embracing the life that comes from within when we feed, nurture, and discipline our souls. You don't need to discipline yourself to form new habits. What you need is to let new habits emerge as you prosper your soul. Think of it this way. If you have a car that has a bad engine, giving it a new paint job, taking driving lessons, or simply changing the oil and filters isn't going to do you any good. Getting a new job, changing churches, or finding a new spouse isn't going to help you or get you where you want to go. What you need is a fundamental overhaul of the car's soul, because your car is your means of transportation from where you are now to where you want to be. If you don't want to keep breaking down along the way, you have to get to the heart of the matter. Your vehicle needs to be overhauled from the inside out. Only when you pay the price to recalibrate the internal workings of your engine will you be able to get into gear. Your soul is the engine of your destiny. So we're going to go for a break, and we're going to stop there. Our next conversation will be prosperity point, and that's on page 47. And so we're going to wrap up our session today. And what can you walk away from this is that in the book of the richer get richer and the poor gets prison, we see clearly prison is defective. There's nothing around to it. Unless you want to stay in denial and continue to live a lie, we clearly scientifically have acknowledged the accuracy of prison is inaccurate. It's wrong. It's definitely generational cycles at its best, generational curses at its best to everyone, not just to the Black communities, because by you practicing poor quality behavior, you're going to produce poor quality results in your gene pool, and therefore you will become terminally extinct of self. As we have seen scientifically, it's an inside job, not an outside job. So if you're not performing at your best inside, you're not going to get the results of infinite realism. You just can't do that. They keep talking about evil beget evil. You can't finite beget finite. Finite begets finite. You can't ever reach infinite life. You cannot ever reach immortality life if you don't practice immortality ways or infinite ways. So we have acknowledged that prison systems is practicing finite behavior, poor quality behavior. So the oppressed group might be oppressed and victims to it, but at the same time, the oppressor and those that build the systems and are authority of the systems and dictate the systems and protect the systems equally have detrimented themselves as well, because they have created extinction to themselves. So now we move over to evoking excellence. So, okay, do we show compassion and mercy? Do we forgive? What happens? Where do we go from here? So evoking excellence is saying, okay, you have to change at the fork of the road. When there is the access point to change, you have to change. You have to consciously know, for one, see it. And then you have to change inwardly. And that's where it goes to the prosperous soul. You cannot change externally. You have to change internally, and then internally change externally, right? And so that is the core of the situation. And why do you want to transform the core when you still got to do the same results? Like a car, you change the engine, you still got to drive, you still got to take care of the engine with oil and gas, you still got to do the external things. So what makes a difference by making sure the engine works? Because it's the longevity. You won't be the community that goes extinct because you dealt with the core. We talk about reparations. That's an external thing that will happen. It has to happen as part of the process. But it has to start inwardly, and that's changing from within. The perspective of life. What do you see? How do you see it? And if that is still toxic and poisonous and defective and destructive, there's not going to be a change, even if you give all away your food. Yes, giving away all your food is part of the process, and it is part of the repair. But one day you'll go back and do it again. And therefore, the cycle begins again. And that is damnation, and that's condemnation. And it's not something you can say or blame it on God. It's what you're doing to yourself. So let's break these cycles and let's move forward in the prosperous soul. And because of the prosperous soul, we can abolish prisons for good. And then once we release the prisoners of war, we can evoke excellence from both sides of the fence, leader to leader models and role models. And then we can build a transformative world that allows the planet Earth to be transformative. Well, this is Dr. Coach K signing off. Once again, one love, much love, all love. Peace and blessings to you, your household, and to your world. Thank you for coming by. Until next time.